I hear that like a human in general is the sum of the 5 closest people to them. Or you're obviously the sum of all the people that you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
But it definitely is like an entryway for me when one of my friends is like, I use Transformers at work. Here's how I do it. And then I want to go out and read the Transformer papers.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's just kind of my workaround. But it is important to always stay up to date.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's really funny. So.
Well, can you tell me a little bit more about your meetup group that you're in?
So Boise Software Developer Group, we meet up. It is the first Thursday of every month. We postponed it for COVID, right? We stopped meeting up. We did a couple of online meetups, but, attendance was pretty sparse. And we are actually just getting that restarted now with, the vaccinations and all the other stuff coming out. So we're real excited to get that back up and rolling. And, we take guest speakers and, kind of get them scheduled out for, I usually try to get at least a couple months in advance so I know what it is. And then we usually provide pizza and, have everyone show up and present for, 30 minutes on a particular topic and then hang out and network and try and, get people jobs and, connect different companies and employers. And you really just have a good time, at least once a month. So. We
do something similar, but it's once a quarter.
Okay.
I'm doing it because it's fun mostly.
Yeah. But it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work to host and manage and, maintain those meetups. And that's one of those things where we would not do it monthly if we didn't have such a large pool of software developers that we pull from in this valley, where it's like, hey, here's the general interest for this year, which we, pull our members of. And then it's like, does anyone want to present on any of these topics? And it usually fills up real quick. So
I might have to steal some of the ideas about pooling members.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Usually just ask people what they're interested in, and I'm like, cool, we'll go with that. Because last time it was quantum computing and reinforced learning. So both very interesting data science topics that are very complex, but don't have much practical application.
So that practical application. So we have a podcast ourselves, which we recorded 2 days ago, right? And one of our topics that we were actually discussing, and I don't know if you've seen any of this or not, but GitHub has just released CoPilot, right? And so CoPilot is essentially like, let's use AI, let's use machine learning, right? Let's throw those big buzzwords out there, right? And I'd be kind of curious from the data scientist standpoint, what do those words actually mean to you? But
I actually have a lecture on that.
I would imagine so, right? A lot of people use them wrong, right? But so GitHub CoPilot is all about, if you comment what you want your code to do, then GitHub will scour its resources and try to build you something that actually works, right? And so then the job of the software developer is more, let me review this to see if this actually does work rather than spend all my time trying to reinvent the wheel, right? So.
And I mean, I think if I'm correct, that's based on natural language processing and things in that space because they have such a giant corpus of programming that they can pull from to do that. And so it's kind of very similar to like GPT-3 in that space. And that, are you familiar with GPT-3?
I'm not familiar with GPT-3, I think is what you said. Yeah. I do know that, yes, there's the natural learning. It's reading the comments and then trying to decipher your intent. And then taking that intent and comparing it against, public repositories. And I mean, there's billions of them, right? So, and then I believe at this current point in time, it's, hey, here's a function where someone commented, it says this is what it does. So we kind of think that's correct, but it's still in beta right now. I actually just got accepted into that beta program. So still just barely starting to play around with it right now. But no, so what is that GPT-3 thing?
So it's just I guess the way to describe it is it's a bunch of neural nets and that are set up like, they're not set up like, they are transformers is in the way that they did it. And the most interesting part is the amount of data it was trained on and the structure of these nets in the way that they were doing it. There are a lot of different competing things out there to GPT-3 that just change the data that it was trained on because they won't actually release the data. Some people feel like the data it was trained on is biased and they're trying to make less biased, and then they release it. So there's like a open source one in Hugging Face. And then they're also gating GPT-3, which makes some people upset, and they're trying to say, well, it's for the good of everyone, because if GPT-3 got out, then spam robots and stuff like that would make really good spam emails. But basically what GPT-3 does, it can almost do anything. It's kind of weird. You can feed it like a very complex publication about a topic and ask it to summarize it in like you were a 5-year-old in 1 or 2 sentences, and then it just plops it out there like that for you. Wow. And it does a lot of different things. It doesn't just summarize things in concise text that is easy to understand. I think me and one of my friends were playing around with it, and we gave it a quantum computing paper, and it just is a very dense topic, and it spit it out in 2 sentences, and we're like, darn, it got it like right on the nail. And I'm like, I would have sat there really for a long time noodling how to make 2 sentences to explain it to a 5-year-old. And, it has all these complex equations and everything, and it just did it way better than I could have. And I was,
Yeah, it's the compute, the process, it's incredible, right? And talking about the biases, though, behind that, a model is only as good as what the data is that's being fed into it, right? And so, that's really interesting. I'll do some extra research on that, but it's one of those things where I first started kind of looking a little bit at the machine learning and how could I actually apply it, right? And for me, everything's a logic gate, right? We're shifting left or right type of idea based upon data sets, and this tutorial thing that I was following was all about teaching in the Unity game engine. You had a paddle and you had a ball, and the goal was to teach that if the ball falls off the paddle, then the computer's sad type of thing, right? And so it was interesting because at first it's just simply, hey, there's no external stimulus, and so the ball falls, the paddle gets turned horizontal, and it catches it, and they win, right? But then you introduce, there's wind factor, and there's all these other different types of things. And so by the end of that tutorial, you had this paddle that could maneuver around and keep a ball, up in the air, which is just super cool, right? But at the same time, it's interesting because when you have a very closed box and you say, well, we know exactly what is going to happen. We know what all the variables we are going to introduce are going to be, then I think it's pretty predictive to say, okay, yes, then I can teach a computer to do that. What I find fascinating about, true AI and machine learning is we don't know what all the variables are going to be, right? And so getting those models trained up to say, well, how do you take something that you've never seen before and use what you have seen to actually infer and say, this is, 98% likely what it is going to be, right? Like it's awesome to me, right? And I don't have nearly enough of a deep understanding of how it actually works, but I do love those concepts. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm building like web applications, right? I'm building forms, I'm building websites, I'm building things of that nature. So I don't get a ton of time to play around with too much machine learning stuff.
I've just been doing it like almost a decade. So
yeah,
I'm like, let me tell you about
Love it.
Machine learning. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Sarah in Tech. Feel free to email me at sarah@sarahinTech.net or follow me on Instagram @sarahinTech. Hope you enjoyed listening.